Welcome back to Endless Tangents. This is episode number 7. I'm your host, Twiggles, with my co-host, Zambies. How are you today?
I am doing good, feeling good. Feel like things are clicking lately.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Excellent.
how are you?
I've been doing pretty good. We're going to have an interesting topic of conversation today. But before we get into that, let's chat about a little bit about our goals. Where we're getting to the beginning of the month again, and we're trying to keep track of just how we're doing and progressing. What was your goal? Quick recap, and how are things going with it?
Yeah, so my original goal was to learn to swim specifically for training for my triathlon. And actually, right before this podcast, I had a lesson with a coach who has been teaching competitive swimming for a long time. And he was able to identify a couple of things like right away with my technique, which allowed me to, once I fixed it, allowed me to swim from one lap to the one side to the other, but not feel like kind of like bobbing and sinking as I go along. It was more streamlined. It felt
Nice.
felt like I was moving and not just kind of treading water from one end of the pool to the other. So I'm really excited about that and hope to continue making progress. But that's me. That's about me, my goals. How about you Twiggles?
My goals, if I remember correctly, I kind of had 2 things I was really focusing on. One was really just around sleep, just trying to keep my sleep to 7 to 7.5 hours a day. And we both just kind of went on vacation. And during my vacation, we had a chance to decompress, to unwind. And I'm happy to say that I actually had 2 days in a row on my Garmin smartwatch said I was at 100% body battery, which doesn't happen often. Between my sleep apnea and just either anxiety or stress or things on my mind, I typically feel like I just wake up really early. But on vacation, we were all relaxed. We're maybe a little bit jet lagged, but we were able to sleep through the night. And again, the watch doesn't lie, or maybe it does. I was able to get to 100% 2 days in a row, which I don't think I've ever done before. Seldomly I get it once, but yeah. So, and the other thing is around my stress snacking. So I think the vacation also helped reduce some of my anxiety. I sort of escaped some of the common things between my family and work and just other types of things that are on my mind. So being able to unwind, to go somewhere different, somewhere new, was very relaxing and calm, and just a great time overall. And fortunately, no major issues. So while ideally I'm going to attempt to try and continue losing some weight, I haven't been very successful, but I still feel pretty good overall. So I can't really complain. But yeah, so sounds like our goals are going good. We're just going to keep pushing on that. But today's main topic of conversation is around growing older and the pains and sometimes sounds that come with it. So I know we always have a friendly kind of competition where who's in more pain today, right? I think it's almost like it alternates. But before this, before we started recording today and just getting ready, I think we're both in decent shape right now. I mean, how are you feeling?
Just so how I feel today, it's so interesting because I've been exercising my whole life. Obviously not in the best manner. When you're young, you can kind of get away with doing things incorrectly. But as you get older, you have to really focus on technique and form and proper warm-ups and stuff. And I feel like today where I sit right now, I feel good. Like I can go running, I can go swimming, I can weightlift, I can cycle. If you asked me this question even a couple of weeks ago, I would have given you a different answer because I was dealing with an injury in my foot and I had lower back pain. And you sleep the wrong way and you get like neck pain, right? And that when you're doing a physical activity like swimming or like if you're playing a sport like tennis where there's a lot of rotational movement and movement of your arms and neck and shoulders, I mean, that stuff is debilitating, even though it's something so simple as just I fell asleep the wrong way. And then you wake up and it literally can ruin your entire next day. And it's very easy to compound too. So just to be able to say right now, like I feel good, which is you can't take that for granted.
Oh, absolutely. Every day is a new day. Like you said, you never know what's going to happen when you go to sleep. Hopefully you don't pull something. I know, I agree with you. That has happened to me as well. Go to bed, suddenly I wake up, wow, something doesn't quite work the same. Something hurts, something's in pain. I too, right now at this moment, feel pretty good. Just like you, it comes and goes. There's a lot of times where I've struggled. I didn't quite train as much as you did. I know we go back to college. I never really focused on going to the gym much. It wasn't until I was really maybe, late 20s, early 30s, I went for basically a year. I lost some weight. This is actually after I got married. But I never really got any formalized training. Never really, back then also, I didn't quite follow a lot of the exercise YouTube channels and workouts. So I didn't really know what to do. And I think after getting, referred to a trainer that you had worked with, I started to learn and just understand the foundations of how to properly hinge at your hips, how to properly lift, how to properly squat, even, some of the most common things where people take it for granted, which is just snow shoveling, right?
Yeah.
Now, it happens in our area where we live that snow can happen. And it doesn't always happen, but when it does, especially if it's a lot of snow, you just have one job. You got to go clear the snow, and you don't finish until you're finished. And then oftentimes you got to really focus and say, hey, when I'm lifting this, how am I doing it? Otherwise, you're going to lift it the wrong way, and suddenly your back is blown for the rest of the week, right? I remember also the first time I ran my 5K, same thing. Prior to that, I had never run more than a single mile in my life. And I was like, you know what? It's fine. We'll get through it. And didn't properly stretch, didn't properly hydrate after, didn't foam roll, didn't do anything. And I was in pain for a good week, right? But to your point, I'm in better shape now where I've been more consistently running. I do try and do on average at least a 5K and a 10K through the year. But pain's not so bad, right?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious. So something that I went through. So after I started working, this is again many years ago, I did end up with back pain and didn't know what was going on. I was on the train and trying to go to work and just noticed that I was just not comfortable, right? And it was something that kind of gradually snuck up on me, right? And I kind of wondering in your circumstance too. So that was probably the first major source of pain that I had. And the unfortunate thing was I remember going to the physical therapy and the diagnosis was, well, your core is just really weak. I said, what do you mean? What is that supposed to mean? I understand and appreciate it much better now. But sadly, that was the first time. Then a few years later, I kind of did my exercises in the rehab place. It got better, mostly went away. And then guess what happens? It comes back because you get lazy, you get complacent, and those muscles wear off, right? So the fortunate thing that we've learned is that the more you train your body and build up these muscles, the more your body remembers. So fortunately, you could bounce back much quicker, but you still got to be diligent, right?
Yeah,
so
it's easier to maintain than it is to start over and build up again, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some research out there that if you've built a certain amount of foundation of muscle, you can maintain those gains for indefinitely to a point by working out say once or twice a week versus having to work out 3 or 4 times a week, or even once a week. If you do a full body split, it'll help to keep what you have. And it kind of goes hand in hand with when you get injured and you go to physical therapy to get whatever fix, you pull your back, you fix your back muscles. If you don't change your habits and you go back to what you're doing, those things will atrophy. And for a lot of people, low back pain, it doesn't sound like it makes sense, but low back pain happens because we sit so much. And your hips get tight. When your one part of your body gets tight, your body tries to compensate. It's really smart at compensating for your different postures and movements. So your hips get tight, your glutes get stretched out, they feel weak. Sometimes you don't even feel them when you walk, right?
Until you try to go do something, and then all of a sudden your body just doesn't react. It doesn't act the same way.
Your body's like, whoa, what was that? When I started going to a trainer, he had me put bands around my knees, right below my knees, and he said to flare your knees and legs out a little so that the band gets tight.
It forces you to stabilize.
It forces you to stabilize. It turns your glutes on. And then he had me walk side to side, pushing off on my leg and using my leg to pull the band and stretch it more. And my glutes were just firing like literally like they haven't been used in years, because it was probably the case. They haven't been used in a long time in that manner. Because when you're at a desk job all day, you don't need them. Your body's really good at adaptations. And it's just the environment and the culture that we live in today promotes sitting down, promotes, sitting in front of a TV or sitting in front of a computer or hunched over on your phone. And so there's so many different things that you have to do to you're going to have to do to undo those things.
Yeah, interesting things. And also a friendly reminder, we are not medical experts. We're not physical trainers. We are just honestly sharing our experiences and the things that we've gone through. We have gotten to this point where we have researched quite a bit. We have worked with professionals. We strongly recommend, if you've never worked with someone, even if it's just for a little bit, just to make sure, especially if you're going through the exercises. I'll kind of introduce again my reluctance to kind of talk to this trainer that we worked with, right? It was for quite a while. You were working with someone, and I was like, you know what? It's okay. I could save the money and go look it up on YouTube and watch the videos. But the problem is, oftentimes, those individuals may either already be fit or they may not even be showing you the right moves. Right? It seems correct, but one little tweak, if you're a little bit off axis, if suddenly your leg or your arm doesn't go in quite the right way, you compound it with the amount of weight that you might be trying to lift. And suddenly you pull something and you hurt yourself. Or you might already have some pre-existing weakness, right, that you have to compensate for correctly. Like you said, there's a lot of exercises using bands to help isolate the location of where you're stretching and strengthening. And I never really understood it. And unless you really understand the science of all the ligaments and all the joints and all the muscles, you might accidentally hurt yourself, which is exactly what I did. Right? I watched a video and I said, oh, that looks great. And let me try and flex and stretch this. And one of the things that I know is our trainer has reinforced with us, which is consistency over intensity, right? It's been resonating in my mind because I know for me, I'm the exact opposite. So there's a reason why they tell me this, right? They say, hey, it's funny. I was just listening to a story. I can't remember, it was on the radio or something, and they were talking about how, actually, I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about, hey, do you want to get physically fit? Well, yeah. So what's your goal? Well, I want to run 3 days a week. I said, oh, great. Have you started? No, I haven't started. Well, why don't you just try and run 1 day a week? And the person goes, well, why would I ever do that? That makes no sense. Right? Why just run 1 day a week? That's not going to do anything. It's either I dream and say that I'm going to do the 3, but don't actually do it, rather than why do I even start? And I think it's important for me, at least, where I focus on just every little thing counts, right? I listen to a bunch of different yoga trainers too, and unfortunately, I haven't quite done it, even though I know it's so important. Every time I generally do it, I feel better. But remembering to do those little bits, even if it's 5-10 minutes, do some stretching, get some walking in, get some steps in. Today, that even though I had my allergies flaring up, me and my wife went for a walk, and I honestly missed it, right? Through the winter, it gets really cold, the sun goes down really early, just getting some movement in, right? Also, some colleagues at work, I know, same thing. They were struggling with shoulder pains, back pains, and I noticed that more and more of them are starting to stand more. Right? Fortunately, we have standing desks. I know both of us have invested in standing desks at home too, because it's so important, right? If you're spending 6 to 8, 10 hours a day, right, doing work or just doing things, you got to try and make your situation as comfortable as possible, not to just relax, but also challenge your body and make sure you keep moving around,
Yeah. And I think we've talked about it before, but also invest in a good mattress, because you spend half your time or a third of your time on that mattress. Don't cheap out. Don't get a cheap mattress. Go to a store and, lie down on the mattresses, talk with people who are in your same position, who have had, ailments. And if they have gotten mattresses, what worked for them or whatnot. It's mattress research is like one of the most contentious things you can ever do, because it's such a personalized thing. There's no one mattress that fits everyone. Everybody's different. Everyone's a different size, different shape, different weight.
And just
you
different personal preferences, right? It is
preferences,
tough.
and you sleep with your spouse, you don't sleep with your spouse, you have a kid in the middle of the bed, you don't have a kid, you know what I mean? Like there's so many different variations. You got to find out what works for you. And if the first one you try doesn't work, don't give up. Try
Yeah.
something different. Like people will try one thing and they kind of are like, it's okay. And then they just stick with it for 10 years. It's like, no, don't settle for that.
I actually remember that was one of the critical breaking points for me too. Funny that you bring it up. We were on a short vacation. We were away, and I remember vividly at the hotel. It was a reputable brand hotel. It wasn't anything super cheap, but for whatever reason, I think it had been around for a while, so the mattresses were relatively soft. And when we slept, I just realized my back is just killing me. Right, the mattress must have been sagging. I'm not the lightest guy, so I'm a heavy guy, and I was just sinking into the mattress, and my back muscles and everything were just in pain to the point where even lying in bed just hurt. And I remember I ended up trying to go to the couch that was also too soft. I ended up just sleeping on the floor. I was like, you know what? I just need something firm. And I did some stretching and exercising and things, and I was able to sleep. But after that, I was like, it's so uncomfortable. I need to be able to build up my body with more muscles and more support so that you never know what's going to happen, right? And of course, um, I know it's easier said than done to find a good mattress. Like you said, it does take a lot. For us, we ended up going a completely different route. So we ended up not buying just a conventional mattress. Again, we ended up going the route of getting tatami mats and latex mattresses and almost building our own, which is good because both me and my wife can almost customize it. We could also swap them out. We are different weights and sizes, so my side will probably wear out faster. So we'll be able to kind of swap them out, right? But to your point, it is highly personalized, and we both really like a firm bed. So it's worked out so far. But with that said, also, there's almost less forgiveness because not too long ago, as you said, right now at this moment, we both feel pretty good. But not that long ago, my back was hurting. I
Yeah.
must have pulled something. I don't know what I did. I was just doing something. And I just remember that, wow, there's just a sudden pain. And it's just that nagging feeling when you wake up and it just hurts. Fortunately for me, it would kind of go away over the time, over the course of the day after walking around, stretching, getting my body in motion, and it just generally felt better, right? But it's back pain, these nagging pains just that don't go away. You get to a point where you just do almost anything to fix it, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of times it's that almost struggle of strength training and building up. That was one of my biggest issues was, and I kept asking my trainer. I did go to some doctors to get some, professional advice. And in my cases, they said, hey, look, it does look like you're weak. It does look like, some of it could be from repetitive stress and injury, but nothing seems to be terribly broken, right? So I think the focus is make sure you train properly and train well and build it back up, right? Because that's always my worry, right? Do I push through this pain? Right? One of the first things we learned with our trainer was they always ask, are you sore or are you in pain? Right? And sometimes it's like, I don't really know. Because if you've never really worked out hard or really understood, it's very easy to just not be sure, And the worst thing to do is to push through pain and then injure yourself even more. And then you need even longer to try and recover.
That's something that I had to deal with. For those who don't know, I think in around 2019, I had a diabetic seizure. And my blood sugar dropped really quickly one morning and I passed out. And then when I woke up, I stood up and I really badly sprained my ankle. But when I woke up, I was like delirious, so I couldn't function. And I had to go to the hospital and stuff. Didn't really know what was going on. And then when I came home, my ankle was just awful. It was bruised and in pain. And it never healed. It didn't heal right, but it just hurt. And at one point, just months later, a year later, it's just still in pain. It doesn't hurt. And I almost was broken down crying because it just hurt so much. And that's, coincidentally, my wife, who likes running, she went to a running store and there was a trainer doing stretches and she took her card. And that's how I met our trainer and started working out with her. And she was able to help me fix a lot of the issues. And, one of the things we find out is your body did heal. when you get an injury, like your ligaments and tendons and muscles, they will heal up, provided it's not like a crazy tear.
Right.
If it's a minor,
or some
if
kind
it's
of a fracture or something.
yeah, I mean, even in a fracture, if it's a kind of the fracture, they can grow back stronger. But like,
True.
it healed, and it turns out like there is a whole component of therapy that a lot of places, at least that I went to, because I had physical therapy for my ankle, I had ultrasound done, X-ray, MRI, and they were all just like, yeah, this is just how your ankle's going to be. Turns out there's nothing wrong with my ankle anymore. It's like a combination of like retraining the muscles, but also retraining your brain to fire to the muscles correctly, right? Because it's almost like it got turned off. And sometimes you kind of see this in sports where like an athlete has a really bad injury, like say an Achilles tear or like a ACL injury in their knee. And those kind of injuries for athletes take 8 months to 10, 12 months to recover from.
Right.
There's a lot of, surgery, therapy, whatever, getting back to fitness to play. But even when they get back, it's almost like they start making mistakes too. And it turns out that like what they're finding is like, even after the first year, like there's a neuromuscular adaptation that is still happening. Like your body is still reincorporating those movements with that healed limb. And so once I realized that part, like, oh, wait, like my body's actually fine. Like my leg, like I'm literally flexing my ankle right now and it feels great. And like 6 years ago, I couldn't even do that. I couldn't even move it left and right. Once you realize like, wait, I did heal. I need to, get physical therapy, but continue to utilize the muscles. Like you need to continue to move. You can't just get injured and then get injured and then get like lazy and not move or sedentary. That's the word I'm looking for, because that's just like a death knell for like your physical fitness.
Yeah.
And
it won't just magically fix itself, I think, is the hard part. So
yeah.
For me, I agree, right? I think the hard part for me for a long time, so I had some shoulder pains. I don't even know what triggered it, to be honest. Kind of like you were saying. Now, you at least, you had an episode and, fortunately you went through, training and things to heal it up. But in my case, my shoulder was bothering me. Couldn't quite figure out what it was, and I just kept pushing through the pain. Right. We were training. I would kind of complain about it, say, hey, it seems weird. But when we went to the doctor, I went to an orthopedic surgeon and they double checked it and they said it does seem to be weak. They didn't think there was any major tears. They did some x-rays and things. So it kind of gave me the green light to go, train again, but very cautiously and being careful. Right. So making sure that any exercises we did, I had seen another doctor and they recommended not to do any kind of overhead exercises, which is tough because I really wanted to do pull-ups, overhead presses and all sorts of things to kind of build up my shoulder. But it was also just making sure I did a proper diagnostic, right? Trying to see and, talking to an orthopedic surgeon, they had me in all sorts of different, kind of positions. They said, hey, stick your arm out this way, rotate it that way, turn it this way. And they would constantly just kind of push, use some light force on a specific angle to see if I had strength or not. And the good thing was, surprisingly, like, yeah, you're pretty strong. You have, good range of motion and good strength in many of these positions, except for this one. And then as soon as they did this one exercise and I rotated my arm in a certain way, I had absolute weakness, could not control it at all. It was as if my arm just went completely down. And it was really amazing to see. And then once they're able to diagnose that, they're able to figure out, what particular ligament or which part of the wherever it would be that's either too tight and needs some work and needs some help. I just recently watched a video from a yoga instructor that I really like. And she was explaining, which is something I've thought about, but I never really thought in the way that she kind of presented it, which is, these core muscles. What exactly are these core muscles? Right. So for those that don't know, oftentimes, if somebody is fit, especially you see, guys at the beach or girls really working out and women, that are really strong, they have like a six pack, right? A lot of people wish they had that. Not only is that building up your ab muscles, but then also it's losing the weight in your body fat to be able to show those muscles. So it is very difficult to maintain and to get. But the important thing is that your abs are just part of your core. right? Technically, your core goes all the way around, surrounding your spine, all the way to your back muscles, also going down towards your legs, your hips, and many different things. And what the video was talking about was, yes, how come if I could do a sit-up, I do have, core muscles, right? But the answer might be no, right? So what happens is you have your abdominal muscles to be able to sit yourself up if you're able to. And if you can't, you can, work on some of those. But all those other types of stabilizing muscles around your core and your trunk are really the important part. So I remember we were challenged during some of our exercises to do some side planks. And I'm like, wow, this is impossible. Couldn't figure it out. It's like, why is this so difficult to do? Right. And then also, again, I had lower back pains. Same thing. Couldn't figure out what the problem was. And it just happened to be one day I was standing at work and I was like, you know what? I kind of flex my pelvis forward because I have an anterior tilted pelvis. So it causes other shortening and lengthenings of my ligaments, and just everything feels tight, right? But when I felt like I would rotate my pelvis under my body and also kind of squeeze my butt, it felt like the pain was being relieved.
Yeah.
And I mentioned it to my trainer and she said, well, you're essentially using your glutes. And I said, no way, right? And it turns out that, as you said, I think my glutes are just severely, severely underdeveloped because unless you train it. And then as I started talking to my trainer to figure this out, she said, there are certain exercises you could use. And what I was so confused was, well, I could still do a lot of things. I could still do, an RDL. I could still do squats. I could still do all these things. How is it possible that my glutes are almost non-existent? Well, like you said, I'm essentially overcompensating. My other muscles may still be able to carry the weight, but then they get strained even more, which then could lead to injury because you're not properly using it. Right.
One of the most common compensators is your lower back, especially when you do RDL, which is a deadlift. Those who don't know, but it's a really, that's a very, when you hear like, oh, don't do deadlifts because you'll hurt your back. Yeah, that's why, because you're not doing them right.
Exactly. So some of the exercises that I was kind of prescribed to do was single leg RDLs or even assisted RDLs, essentially holding onto a chair. And I did notice that, right? Especially when I was younger, we used to play more sports. We were much more active, again, less sitting around. But I noticed that I felt like my balance was better.
Yeah.
And as I'm getting older, part of the reason why I feel like I don't have as much balance is probably due to my core just being weaker. My glutes are not able to solidify and hold my body in place. Everything just feels shaky. I'm also, probably heavier and things like that. But, it's important to realize that that's really where it starts from. You have to go holistically across your whole body and try and identify what are the areas that you can really work on to just improve. Right. And are you really training everything?
Yeah. And that kind of goes into like, as you're aging, your body is not going to perform the way it did when you were like in your 20s. Right. And like, it's tough to swallow. I get it. Everyone, wants to think that their prime is like 20, 25, but like your prime is really like 20, 25 to 45, really. Right. So that's one thing, right? Don't be so discouraged about that. Like, and the other thing is you just have to modify how you do things, right? Like when I was younger, my goal was like, I want to push the heaviest weight. Like I was always trying to hit like a 400-pound deadlift. That was like one of my goals. I would always be working out 5 days a week and zero cardio. I did not do any cardio. I was up to like 230 pounds and I was still, I looked fit. I didn't look fat, but I did have a lot of body fat on my body. And now I realize like, as I'm getting older, like I need to keep a balance and I need to be able to do multiple things, right? Being able to weightlift, I'm not trying to push heavy weight. I'm trying to more focus on the technique and the form and getting a good workout in, trying to make sure that I'm squeezing all the right muscles during each rep trying to make that connection with my mind and that muscle. And then like, doing cardio, just why? Because so I can stay fit and have a healthy heart so I can run around after my kids.
And build up the VO2 max and who knows
exactly
when you're going to need that sort of endurance. Right. There's a lot of different things.
As you get older, right? Like you need to think about like, what do I want to do when I get older? Right. When I retire, what do I want to be able to do? And there's one of my favorite YouTubers. His name is oh God, Martins Licis is like a European. He's a strongman competitor, and one of the people who used to be on his channel, who sometimes is on his channel, his name is Odd Haugen. He's like this old time strongman competitor, and he's in his like 70s maybe, and the guy works out all the time, and he's like a coach and a trainer for strongmen. That guy is still weightlifting to this day, lifting hundreds of pounds. Like, he has one of the strongest grips in the world for someone who's in his 70s or 80s. I think he's like in his 80s. He's had like heart surgery, but like, you know, he talks about how he's lost a lot of strength, but he's changed his workouts to stay relevant. You know, maybe he can't deadlift 700 pounds anymore, but he'll do something different, which is like use a thicker bar, which works your grip out more, which means you can't deadlift as much, but you still get kind of a, you know, workout in, and he has to warm up longer. But, you know, there's a lot of modifications you can do as you get older to still maintain your fitness. And another one is swimming. Like the coach that I saw today, like he is old. Like, he's like beyond 70, and he can move through the water like I've never seen. He was like a collegiate Olympic level swimmer. But like, you have to do these kind of things to stay fit and stay mobile. You want to be independent when you get older, and being able to do those things, like you need to set a goal and then work towards it
and be intentional. I agree.
Yeah.
I think while you were saying, it's important, that's nothing more motivating than being able to have something that brings you joy, that you want to be able to do. I know there was a video that you shared with me, you know, before we kind of started prepping for this, and it was a video, I don't know if you want to talk about it, where, you know, a guy, was training with a kettlebell.
He started training with a kettlebell every day, and he's like, you know, retired in like his 70s or maybe 80s. And then all his like neighbors are like looking at him like he's crazy. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to hurt yourself. But he had a reason, right? So he's working out, lifting up this kettlebell every single day. And it turns out that the reason was that when he went at Christmas time to see his kids, that he could pick up his grandchild and lift her up all the way to the top of the tree to put the star on it.
Right. And having that intention,
having the intention and practicing to have that goal, to be able to do that. And, you know, it is a commercial, but like, it's still relevant. It still hits you in the feels.
Yeah.
Right.
Motivating for sure.
You feel like, you feel a lot of emotions out of that because it's cute, but it, you know, it's heartfelt. It's, it feels real, right? That's like a real reason to do something.
Yeah, it's often those times that you hope not to hit that rock bottom. But even on the vacation, I know we were chatting about it, where there was a point where I did need some baseline of physical fitness. We were somewhere where we weren't quite crawling, but we were definitely, you know, almost squatting and crawling in a sense, like sort of, you know, ducking down. And my kids could easily run through it, but I'm a taller guy, and I'm 6'1", and I don't quite fit in these places. So in order to get through, I had to essentially crawl or get on my hands and knees or just squat and walk. And I found myself getting winded, right? Being able to, I still have a baseline, you know, cardio because I have been doing running, but with my body size and the extra kind of pounds that I'm carrying, these are things that I want to try and get rid of. Now, on top of that, you know, some of the things that I know we've talked about is just as we're getting older, there are certain things that we want to be able to do, right? Like you said, being independent is really important for I think both of us. We have some of our older, you know, parents that are, you know, falling unfortunately more often than we would like. Just being able to get around. I remember watching some videos with a guy, DDP Yoga. He has a class, and I love watching and seeing these inspirational stories about older people or just people that are struggling. And it seems so simple. Being able to get off the toilet and get, you know, or go take a shower or walk up and down the stairs, get yourself some breakfast. Once you start to lose the ability to do those things, you suddenly become so much more dependent. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the worst part is if you do start to fall, it's really difficult to recover. So it's even more important to make sure you have muscles and just body fat surrounding your bones, because once you get older, it is difficult to maintain, right? Your bodies are much more fragile. They're much more brittle. And just some basic things, being able to carry some of your groceries, being able to get up off the ground. And this is something that kind of came up at our assisted living just recently. And, the aides came by and found my dad on the floor. And he's like, no, I swear I didn't fall. I was just kind of crawling to try and get over there. But they wouldn't believe him because said, why would you just be on the floor? So I tried to interrogate him and I said, you sure you're not hurt? He's like, no, I'm not hurt. But I was also curious, like, well, how are you going to get yourself back off the ground?
Yeah.
That's also not that easy, right? Especially if you're not physically fit. Really important to just find those things and think about it, right? I'm not saying we're going to get all that fast. Hopefully not. We're going to be focused on doing a lot of exercises in the meantime. But it is very easy for these things to sneak up on you, especially those sports you enjoyed playing once upon a time. You enjoyed running, going out, like you said, chasing kids. Kids grow up so fast. So you really have to anticipate and be prepared for those times. Otherwise, it'll sneak up on you.
I mean, one of the things that leads to old age, and as you're getting older, what can accelerate your aging is chronic illness. And what they're finding a lot is that, people who have chronic illness, it's not just like you have diabetes, it's a management of your blood sugar. No, it affects like your entire body, every aspect, right? And what they're finding is that a lot of these illnesses today aren't just like, say, diabetes or Alzheimer's or what have you, but they're mitochondrial dysfunction. And if you don't know what mitochondria is, it's the power plant in your body. It produces ATP, which is like the energy currency of your body. You burn it for your body to do everything, literally everything. And what they're finding is that a lot of metabolic illness like diabetes is a mitochondrial dysfunction. Your mitochondria doesn't work properly. What does that mean? It means like the energy levels drop. Your functions in your cells stop working correctly. You get fatigue. You get muscle weakness. You just feel like crap. And it's counterintuitive, but what I've found is that training for the triathlon, when you do a lot of cardio, a lot of zone 2 cardio, it makes your mitochondria more efficient. And that's how a lot of those elite athletes, they have like really low heart rates because their one pump of their heart is so efficient, it gets the blood through everything and the mitochondria becomes more efficient. Because, as we said earlier, when you're doing things, your body adapts. If you're not doing anything, it adapts to not doing anything. If you're constantly exercising and moving, then your body adapts to that.
Challenging yourself.
Yeah. And so they're finding that like mitochondrial dysfunction can lead to just feeling terrible, waking up terrible, sleeping terrible, gaining weight, just brain fog, all those kind of like symptoms that you might be feeling as you get older. And it sounds so difficult, and it
seems counterintuitive.
Terrible to say like, well, just go run, go on a bike and do some cardio. But it really is
so long
like
as
one of
you're
the most important
too,
things,
right? So
yeah,
I mean,
if you're physically fit, you can do it. And I'm not saying go run and sprint. Like you should be able to maintain a conversation. If that means you have to walk, just walk, right?
Yeah.
But you have to move, you have to do something.
It is definitely incremental. I agree. And I think it is very counterintuitive sometimes. I know I have a relative who also is just struggling. It's like, I just don't feel good. So the default is I'm just going to sleep it off. Mm-hmm. And you sleep it off and you just don't seem to recover. It just seems to get worse and worse. Now, again, there could be other types of issues. It could be, actual sleep disruption. There could be anxiety, stress, could be allergies. Allergies is one, again, I know we've talked about it briefly in the past. It's difficult because as much as I want to go run and exercise, I get bombarded with pollen and allergies and I just struggle. Either my eczema flares up, I'm congested, I can't breathe. And then what do? So, but is that an excuse to just give up? No. No. During the winter, it was, like you said, me and your wife, we decided we've always had our sort of steps challenge. And the way around it was, well, we can't go out. We don't want to go out in the middle of the night. It's not safe or it's dark or it's cold. We're going to get a treadmill at home, right? We started doing walking treadmills and just, killing time and just easy to pass the time, right? Yeah. And there's almost no, I mean, there can be excuses, but your health is so critically important that you got to prioritize the time and the money where you can. And I say that as a friendly reminder myself because I haven't worked out as much as I wanted to this week, but I don't let that be an excuse. Whenever I could squeeze something in, I try and do it. I typically try to do at least 2 to 3 exercises, but realistically it's been more like 1 or 2. But then when I can, go for the walks, go for the run, really no excuse, and just adapt to what you have, right?
At the end of the day, though, that's better than doing nothing. And then you also have to realize that as you get older, everything just gets harder. Your body is not
Yes.
going to produce like testosterone or
Yeah.
HGH or whatever like anabolic hormones it produces. It's going to be harder to gain muscle. It's going to be harder to do a lot of things, right? Start earlier. You start earlier, you can maintain it easier. It's kind of like investing your money for finance. If you
100%.
start investing at 20, you'll have your retirement money by the time you're 65. It's the same thing for your
You've
health.
built up that foundation. You've built up the habits. It's critically important. I agree. I was actually just going to rotate to some of that too. While we're obviously not women, we have very important women in our lives. Our moms, our wives, our friends, and hormone is something difficult, right? Like some people, you might have some hormonal disruptions. Obviously, all women are going to go through, perimenopause and other hormonal changes that, a lot of times even doctors might not know that much, which is pretty crazy to say. I've watched a whole bunch of, celebrities and people going through this saying, why is there not more education about this, right? Half of the world is going to have to go through this. Shouldn't there be more literature and understanding of the symptoms and what happens, and, not be treated such, that you're so out of the blue, you're so, odd, when everyone's kind of going through it, and everyone's symptoms are slightly different. So critically important to try and work with your doctors. I always had some, skepticism about some of the doctors, because again, even with some of the things with the female hormonal changes, they might not even know. They may say, hey, just go take this medicine or that drug. And they might just be on, old education, right? As times have changed, if they're not following up, things might have been proven differently, right?
Shopping, having a primary care or specialist doctor, you're allowed to change them if they don't feel like they're working for you.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that it's up to you to change it. No one's going to really advocate for your health. You have to do it yourself, which is, it sounds
hard to do sometimes. And even with our whole sort of medical coverage industry, I have another friend that's recently was going through exactly that, some kind of routine x-rays just to be careful about, different potential cancers and things like that. And suddenly they get hit with thousands of dollars bill. Right. And where did this come from? They were saying it was going to be covered by insurance.
Mm-hmm.
They did cover it, but they just didn't say how much. And there's so much money that they have to owe now. So they're trying to go fight it. They're trying to see if there's any ways that we could change it. But it's a tough world out there, so.
Yeah, there are a lot of like disruptive startups coming into the health industry, like Function Health and Mito Health, where you can like pay a set amount of cash and get like a blood test done and then have an actual doctor review your tests versus like going to your primary care, arguing with them, and then having,
trying to get the test passed, right?
And then having the insurance cover it, right? So there's things you might have to jump through, but that's all to say, like, you have to advocate for your health. If you don't feel if you feel like something is wrong, then you should look into it. You should talk to a doctor. You don't take no for an answer, right? Like my ankle, my doctor was like, yeah, that's just the way it's going to be. Well, it turns out that's not true, right? Like, it took a couple of years, but I figured out that with the help of like other experts, like, hey, I have full range of motion and functioning of my ankle. I can go running and play sports and make cutting motions that I couldn't do like 6 years ago. So
yeah.
Finding
that right trainer. I mean, I know we've been searching for a while too. Sometimes they all have their strengths and weaknesses, but that was what I found fascinating with, some of those DDP yoga videos where it was a paratrooper who would, jump out of planes and then parachute down and landed really hard in his knees to the point where he wasn't able to walk. And basically all the doctors said, you're never going to walk again. But through yoga, through a lot of exercise and training and being intentional, he was actually able to walk again, even do like, a handstand and actually run, which is incredible. Right.
Yeah.
But that was after a tremendous amount of exercise and work, but being intentional and making sure that he was doing it safely and building his muscles back up. Like you said, unless you actually have something broken, there are many times where you may already have injured yourself, and you're not able to recover. But make sure you get the professional help to see what your limits truly are. And is it just because you don't want to do it? Or does it hurt a lot? Right? You got to find that breaking point of not injuring yourself more, but working through that pain to be able to build your body back up. I think another area of our pains that I think more recently for me has been in my shoulder, which I mentioned, but more in my neck. And I think we talked about this, and I didn't realize that it was bothering me. The specific moment in time when I realized was when I was trying to back out of my driveway and I was turning my head, and I realized this kind of feels weird because I was not turning my head, I was turning my entire upper body. Why? Because my neck was stiff and I unconsciously knew I had to go look. Well, the only way I was going to be able to see the crossroad was to turn my whole body.
Yeah.
I was like, this feels really strange. And I almost used to make fun of my wife because she had a very tight neck. A trainer worked with her and said, okay, well, you have to do these basic exercises where you essentially, you're sitting and you take your hand and you apply pressure to your head and you almost pull it to the side. You're effectively just stretching the sides of your neck muscles. I was like, well, that seems dumb. But then I realized, hey, this is actually important. It could be as simple as maybe your sleeping pillow is not set up correctly. Maybe it's not the right height, it's not the right thickness, it's not the right, consistency, the right material. And unfortunately, I've gone through a number of different pillows and I still haven't quite found the right one. So I'm going to have to keep trying. But what I do notice is, wow, when I wake up, my neck just feels stiff. Something doesn't feel right, Kind of curious, have you had any, was that on your list of pains and things that you've struggled with too? Or not so much?
The neck one is kind of interesting in the shoulder because having started the swimming for the triathlon training, I did have
really
trouble.
You got to tilt your head.
You have to be able to be, what I'm learning is you have to be really flexible with swimming. Like you actually don't move your head, but your body sort of rotates on its axis around your head. Yeah. And then when you're fully into your stroke is when you can then turn your head to the side and breathe. So now if your neck is stiff, you're not going to be able to turn to the side as well. You're going to open your mouth and there's going to be water there instead of air. And then two, if you're like your whole thoracic spine, your upper spine area is stiff and your lower back is stiff, you're not going to be able to have the rotational flexion around your spine to reach forward. Like if you were to raise your hand and reach all the way up to the sky and just keep reaching, your body will start to twist, right? And that feeling is how you should be swimming, right? That natural twist that happens from when you push your arm forward up above you is how you get into the right position to breathe. Now, if you can't do that, you're not going to swim. You're just to be kind of like flopping around in the water and bobbing your head in and out and going up and down. And if you can't twist properly and turn to the side and breathe quickly and back, well, then your upper body will start to float up, your legs will start to sink, and then it's just a hot mess. And so shoulder and neck pain I'm more acutely aware of it today because of that. I've had lower back pain as recently as a couple of weeks ago, but what I found was I did a lot of single-legged exercises. So one of the things I was working with my trainer was just building up leg strength. Yeah. And so he has me doing a lot of single-legged stuff. So I really kind of pushed the envelope on the weights that I was using for that. And
you also find the weakness in which side, because I agree. I was doing RDLs and it's, this feels good. I'm stretching both hamstrings and stretching everything in my lower body. But then when you get challenged to do just one, I realized real quick so I was doing, I think, single-legged bridge ups. And I said, wow, how come on my one side that was weak, I can't even get off the ground at all.
Yeah.
Right? Completely overcompensates by the other side, which explains why just on that side that was weak, my foot always hurts. My leg always seems to bother me. That's exactly where the tightness in my back is, and it's all that one side. And then once you've confined it, it's like, wow, now I can actually try and focus on working on it.
Yeah. And to your point, once I started doing single-legged exercises with weights, if you're interested, it's called a curtsy lunge. You can look it up using a landmine press. And I basically hold a barbell in my arms and then I go down into a lunge, but at an angle. It really increased the strength of my legs to the point where a lot of my back pain literally disappeared. The day I did the workout, the next morning, the back pain was gone. And one thing that I was talking with my trainer about was just well, stuff hurts. And he's like, at some point though, you have to kind of work through some of that pain. If you're not getting worse, you're fine. it might hurt to do some things, and that's
Right.
okay as long as you're
Yeah.
not getting worse. So if it's at like a 5 out of 10 on the pain scale, the next day you still feel like a 5 out of 10 or a 4 or a 3,
Hopefully building up something.
you're going to have to work through some of that pain before it starts to go away. And that's how it was in the beginning, where it just everything hurt.
Yeah.
But
Especially for
as I
me.
did it, it started to go away a little bit here and there.
Yeah. I also have a lot of very tight parts of my body. So going to get massages and things were always nice. But a lot of times I had to do some myofascial release, right? So I had to go lie on a lacrosse ball, use the foam roller, and it feels like tremendous pain. But what it's doing is, there was a few points where I would be lying on a softball or lying on a lacrosse ball, and I could almost feel the tension just magically going away. And that's the crazy part, is that your body is all connected, right? It's all connected by the fascia. And oftentimes I kept complaining, like, my foot really hurts. And they would say, okay, well, find this spot on your back and then apply pressure to it. And all of a sudden I could feel literally the tension kind of relieving, because what was happening was it was all connected, but it was often to my lower back. And then when I applied the ball to it and put some pressure on it, it would essentially force it to relax. And then once that started to relax, the rest of all the ligaments would now also relax, right?
Yeah.
Which is crazy. So I'm constantly going back to those kind of same exercises every time, which is not great, because that means I'm probably being complacent. But I have been still working on strengthening it, and things have generally been feeling better. I don't do it as often unless I get overworked with certain things and I just kind of lose track of time.
Yeah.
But all right, so I think we're getting to the end. And just wanted to jump into one of our rabbit holes. And
wait, before we do that, though,
oh, good.
I think earlier I had the most injuries, but I think that I am now giving you the crown for most injured.
Oh, man. I will have to make sure that I return it back. It's not a competition, or is it? But yes, I think
it definitely, it's like one of those where it's like, well, I'm more injured than you, but you don't want to be.
You don't want to be.
You don't want to be. You don't want to be.
I agree. I think we're both trending in the right direction. I think the most important part is especially figuring out, just it's such a relief to be able to figure out and work through it. Because for the longest time, again, especially like my shoulder, I just couldn't tell, and I kept asking for help. I'm like, is it because I've hurt something? Like, did I tear something? Did I rip something? In which case, then I can't work through it. Right.
Yeah.
So for a long time, I think it was about 6 months, I saw the doctor and they said, hey, you really should just, it's an overuse injury. Don't push anything. And I literally was not allowed to lift anything above my shoulders. Right. I found other ways to get everything done. And it did help. The pain generally went away. But then it gets to a point where, like you said, it will start to atrophy. You're not going to be able to use it, and it kind of just stays weak. So you have to then identify when it's in good enough shape to be able to recover, and then be able to start working it out again. Right.
Yeah.
And now I'm in better shape. I'm finally kind of back to some of my overhead stuff. I'll hopefully be able to get back to pull-ups and things. And I still don't really know what happened. I don't know how I injured it. I must have pulled it some. I was even thinking maybe I was in a fight in my sleep, and I was just punching the air and just, who knows, maybe I tangled my arm underneath my own body or something. But it was rough. So
honestly, when you told me the story about like your shoulders, that you couldn't lift them up, to 90 degrees, like you were stuck in like a T pose, like I literally had to like sit down and think about, how is that possible?
Yeah. So the specific test that I was asked to do, and I realized, was like you just said, while you're standing still, I was standing up. I essentially would keep my palms to the sides of my body, and I would gradually lift my arms up both at the same time to a T. And that was essentially as far as I can get. So for whatever reason, my shoulder, like the rotator cuffs and things, were either just so locked up and so tight that normally you should be able to rotate the ball joint in your socket to be able to go higher, unless there is actually something structurally wrong, right, where you can't, lift it up. But everything was just so tight that I physically felt like I couldn't do it. And doing a lot of painful, massages and using lacrosse ball, I would have to essentially almost grind down that muscle on both my shoulder blade and in the front of my shoulder and the top of my chest. And it just felt horrible. Again, a lot of it was just from tension of sitting poorly. I think that's the other thing. I've noticed a lot of people that I don't want to critique people, but I just see it just feels uncomfortable. And often at work, I'll go walking around and say, hey, weird question. Do your shoulders hurt? And they said, yeah, every day. And then I look and I don't do this, but you almost take a picture of them and then show it back to them. Because oftentimes you don't realize, right? Even our exercises where our communication, even with us recording ourselves, when do you ever criticize yourself? I mean, yes, you see yourself in a mirror, but that's also why at the gyms, they have all the mirrors. So you could see your own form, right? Because in my mind, I'm at home. I don't have a mirror. But that's why we work with our trainer virtually. And they say, hey, whoa, 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 whoa. Your form is not great. Right, you're bending over a little bit too much, your back is rounded a little too much, and then suddenly, ow, something hurts. Well, because you didn't do it quite right. So when I kind of reflect and ask these people at work, I say, hey, do your shoulders hurt? They say, yes. It's often because the desk is just too high up, right? Everything should be 90 degrees. And maybe we'll try and reference this, but if you're not sitting properly at your desk and in your seat, everything should be 90 degrees. Your knees should be 90 degrees. Your thighs to your hips up to your back should be 90 degrees. And your shoulders should be relaxed. And your elbows should be resting 90 degrees as well. And essentially when they were doing this, their arms were almost like up to their shoulders. Their elbows were up to their shoulders, kind of sitting at the desk. And they wondered why. It was like, well, if you look at it, essentially you're shrugging your shoulders for 8 hours a day. And you wonder why your body hurts, you know?
Yeah, I've been guilty of like sitting in my chair and I look like a Bavarian pretzel.
Some people also really like to recline a lot. Maybe it's comfortable, heavy recline. I know also I was guilty of this, which I think was throwing off even more some of my hip alignment, was I like to sit on one foot. Which I know you can't really see me now, but even just during this podcast, I'm constantly fidgeting because I'm often sitting under one foot versus the other. But that throws off your balance, which is even more important. Ideally, maybe we'll do this. We'll start recording while standing. That'll force us to be in better posture. But yeah.
One day.
We'll get there. But yeah, so getting towards our usual segment of the rabbit hole, kind of curious, what was something that you kind of dove into and spent maybe a little bit too much time working through?
Well, the weather is getting better here, and I fired up the grill and it didn't work.
Oh boy.
Well, so I had to replace the button assembly on the grill, the igniter. And then it sort of started working, but my grill is old. So then I started looking at sales and researching. And then I saw a really nice grill at a local Costco and trying to convince my wife to buy a new grill because I think it would be really good for us for our meal prepping. Bigger grill, you can grill more stuff. We were at the grocery store the other day and she's picking out vegetables. I said, don't get too many because we don't have enough space on the grill. She also gave me like a eye roll and then just walked away.
we did get a comment on one of our episodes about some of our ADHD impulse purchases and things. So we may have to bring this up. Maybe this is a good topic to talk through.
Yeah, I really do want a new grill, but I also don't need one. So
you can see what you can salvage. It's funny as you're talking about something that was getting old. So my rabbit hole was also around Costco. It was about warranties for our TV. So unfortunately, our TV, for whatever reason, one day, it was about a month ago, my wife was saying, hey, I think something's wrong. The TV's just not powering on. Couldn't figure out what it was. Nothing. It could be just maybe the system board died. We tried to reach out to Costco, fortunately, and it was only about 2 years old. And they said, hey, you know what? They were going to send a electrician or someone to go check it out, technician to come try and fix it. And, they just basically said, hey, we actually have no parts to fix it. We're not going to be able to do anything about it. We're just going to have to refund it. So kind of worked out, but, throughout the time before, that we got to that point, I was busy researching, trying to see, what do I do? Am I going to be able to get my money back? How does this work? Fortunately, Costco has been fantastic with their warranties, and even with the TV came with an extra Allstate warranty. So I was pretty happy with it. We ended up getting a new TV from there. So we're going to be exchanging it and returning our old one soon, but not necessarily, encouraging everyone to go to Costco, but the warranties are pretty great. Fortunately, they were able to take care of it, and hopefully everything, kind of resolves itself. But
to your point about Costco and rabbit holes and impulse, so last year I bought a pizza oven for my birthday, and it arrived in terrible shape. It was such an impulse buy. It arrived in terrible shape. Costco picked it up and sent me a new one. But the pizza oven is like 120 pounds, so the box just can't handle it during shipping. So the second one arrived, it was all scratched up and broken. They took it back again, and the third one arrived. And like, really, no questions asked. Just take a picture and just be like, "Hey, this is just not what I ordered." And they're like, "Yep, we'll send you a new one." Definitely vouch for Costco warranties; are pretty solid.
Awesome.
And one more thing is that if I can't convince my wife to get a grill, I already know what the next one item is, and it's definitely gonna be an ice cream maker.
Oh boy, that almost sounds like an ultimatum. I'm not sure how your wife is going to react, but yes, we'll see. I think we may have to sooner than later get to ADHD purchases and the things that are in our house, and maybe almost guilt ourselves to either try and get rid of some of these things.
Yes,
or do something with it.
We'll have to do an episode on the ADHD hobby tax.
Absolutely. Awesome. And then how do we get here? I think we got through most of the things that we wanted to get through. There's so much. And very curious for those that are listening, if you'd love to, we'd love to hear from you. Just write out, what are some of the things that you maybe notice tend to hurt more? Is it also your back? Is it your shoulders? Maybe something else that's a little bit odd? And, what are some of your suggestions and tips that kind of make you feel better? I think we're constantly looking. And again, even those little things, working with a professional is almost a shortcut. Can be difficult, right? It does have a financial cost. Finding a good trainer that fits your, where you are. Very fortunately, we were able to work with people that are virtual, which is also great. Even though they can't physically touch you and feel these things, there are many, many diagnostic tests and exercises that they can identify where some of the problems are. And the proof's in the pudding, right? If they're able to show you, it's fascinating working with a true professional. They will say, hey, you just need to rotate slightly. And then suddenly you could just feel it. Like you said, using a band, putting it around your knees, doing certain clamshell exercises, and suddenly it feels like, wow, why does this muscle feel so difficult to use? Well, it's because you've probably never used it, or it's atrophied so much, right? And your body adapts.
Yeah, putting the one gear that's not working back into the machine, all the gears start working. That's kind of how it feels.
Yeah. I agree. Awesome. All right. Well, let's wrap this up. We'll stay tuned for our next visit, and appreciate it. It was an awesome chat.
It was awesome to talk to you, Twiggles, as always, and take care, everyone.
Take care.